My brother didn't look at me when I walked in. He looked at his attorney. That told me everything I needed to know about how the morning was going to go. The conference room on the 14th floor of Hargrove and Sims smelled like leather and old money, and the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been wrong in public. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on. My brother's lawyer, a man named Clifton Beauvais, who wore his suits like a second skin and had the handshake of someone who charged by the hour, was already seated, already arranging papers, already performing. I sat down across from them. My brother finally looked at me then. He almost smiled. Not quite. Just enough. "Didn't bring a lawyer, Raymond?" he said. "Didn't need one," I said. He exchanged a glance with Clifton Beauvais. The glance said everything his smile hadn't. It said, "This will be quick." I folded my hands on the table and waited. "My name is Raymond Earl Calhoun. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years in the United States Army Infantry, then logistics, then something I'm not permitted to describe in detail even now, and I retired at the rank of colonel with a chest full of decorations I keep in a shoebox under my bed, because I never saw much point in displaying them. I grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky. Coal country. Steep hills and narrow roads, and a particular kind of quiet that settles into you when you're young and never entirely leaves. My father, Douglas Calhoun, worked the mines for 22 years before his lungs gave out. My mother, Ruth, kept the family together with the same quiet determination that I later recognized in the best soldiers I ever commanded, the ones who didn't need to announce their strength because they never stopped using it. There were 3 of us children. Myself, the youngest, my sister Diane, the middle, and my brother, Mitchell Douglas Calhoun, the eldest, the favorite, and for as long as I can remember, the one who believed that birth order was a form of divine appointment. Mitchell had opinions about most things. He had opinions about the right way to hold a fork, the right neighborhood to live in, the right kind of car to drive to church. He had opinions about my decision to enlist at 22 instead of finishing my business degree. He expressed those opinions at Thanksgiving dinner the year I signed my papers, in front of my mother and my father and my grandmother and the preacher from our church, and he did not lower his voice when he did it. "The Army," he said, "the way some people say the county jail." I didn't argue with him. I finished my sweet potatoes, and I left the next morning. That was 42 years ago. In the decades between that Thanksgiving and the morning I sat down across from him in that conference room, Mitchell had built himself a life that looked, from a certain angle, like success. He ran a commercial real estate firm in Lexington. He served on the board of 2 charities. He married a woman named Sandra who smiled with her teeth and not her eyes, and they had a son named Beau, who Mitchell talked about the way men talk about trophies. He also, somewhere along the way, acquired a very specific set of assumptions about me. That I had nothing. That I had done nothing. That the Army had been a long detour through irrelevance, and that whatever pension I drew, whatever life I had built in the 31 years I spent serving this country, amounted to the kind of small, quiet existence that deserved at best a polite nod at Christmas. He was not cruel about it, exactly. Mitchell was too careful for cruelty. He was dismissive, which is its own particular thing. He asked about my little place in Tennessee. It is not little, and whether I was keeping busy in retirement, I am, and whether the pension was enough to get by on, it is. More than enough with the patient, slightly pained expression of a man who has accepted that not everyone can be him. I let him have it. I had learned, a long time ago, in places far harder than any conference room, that the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is nothing. You let them keep going. You let them arrange all their certainty in front of you like furniture. And then you let events do the talking. The events that morning had a lot to say. The reason we were sitting in that conference room on the 14th floor of Hargrove and Sims had to do with our mother's house. My mother, Ruth Calhoun, had lived in the same house in Harlan County for 53 years. A white clapboard 2-story on Sycamore Ridge Road, with a porch that wrapped around 2 sides and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and the particular cedar soap she ordered from a catalog in Missouri. After my father died, she lived there alone. She kept the garden. She went to church. She called me every Sunday at 6 in the evening, no matter where I was in the world. Germany, Kuwait, Japan, Virginia, and we talked for exactly 45 minutes because she believed long-distance calls were a luxury and couldn't be broken of the habit even after they stopped charging by the minute. She died 18 months ago. Peacefully, in her own bed, in that house, at the age of 87. I was with her. Mitchell was not. He sent flowers, and a card that said, "With deepest sympathy," as though he were a colleague rather than a son. What Mitchell did not know, what he had never bothered to ask, because asking would have required acknowledging that I existed in some capacity beyond the disappointing younger brother, was that my mother's house had not belonged to my mother for 11 years. It belonged to me. The story of how that came to be is not complicated, but it requires some background. When I was deployed to Kuwait in 2009, my mother called me on a Sunday evening, same as always, and her voice had a quality I hadn't heard before. Not distress, exactly. More like a person standing at the edge of something and looking down at it steadily. She told me the property taxes had gotten behind. She told me the house needed a new roof. She told me Mitchell had looked at the numbers and told her, gently, that he was stretched thin himself right now, what with the firm and the new property in Lexington, and perhaps she should consider whether the house was practical at her age. She told me all of this the way she told me most things, without drama, without self-pity, with the plain-spoken honesty of a woman who had learned early that facts did not improve by being softened. I asked her what she needed. She gave me the number. I sent it the following week. I didn't mention it again, because she didn't want me to, and because that's how we were with each other. Over the next 11 years, there were other numbers. The roof. A furnace that gave out the winter of 2013. The back steps that rotted through. Medical bills from 2016, when she had a spell with her heart and spent 4 days at the hospital in Middlesbrough. Small amounts sometimes, larger ones occasionally, and I sent what was needed without making it a conversation because it didn't need to be one. What I did not fully understand, in those early years, was how Mitchell had been handling the property taxes. When I looked into it, in 2012, I discovered that he hadn't been. They were 3 years behind. The county had sent notices that my mother had not shown Mitchell because she didn't want to trouble him, and Mitchell had not asked because he had assumed someone else was handling it. I paid the back taxes. All 3 years. Then I had a conversation with a real estate attorney in Lexington, a woman named Patricia, who had been a captain in the JAG Corps and understood both the legal situation and the kind of person who ends up in it, and we talked about what made sense going forward. What made sense was a purchase agreement. My mother would deed me the property. I would assume all taxes, maintenance, and costs. She would have lifetime occupancy, full use of the house for as long as she lived, with no rent, no interference, no conditions. On paper it was a sale, for $1. In practice, it was a promise between a mother and her son that she would never have to leave her house because of money. She cried a little when we signed the papers. I did not, because I was a colonel in the United States Army and I had not cried since 2004, but it was closer than I will admit. We did not tell Mitchell. This was not an act of malice. It was a practical decision. My mother knew her oldest son. She knew that if he learned the house had transferred to me, there would be conversations, long, loud, Thanksgiving-ruining conversations about fairness and family and what was owed to whom. She was 81 years old and she had earned the right to spend her remaining years without those conversations. So we kept it between ourselves and Patricia and the Harlan County Clerk's office, where the deed was filed and recorded and available to anyone who cared to look it up. No one cared to look it up. Not until after she died. My mother's will, which Mitchell had helped her draft through his own attorney 8 years earlier, left the house to both of us equally. Half to Mitchell, half to me. This had seemed straightforward to everyone involved, because everyone involved had assumed my mother owned the house she lived in. When the estate went to probate and the title search came back, Mitchell's attorney found a deed transfer recorded 11 years prior. The property had belonged to Raymond Earl Calhoun since 2013. Ruth Elaine Calhoun had had no ownership interest to bequeath. This was the information that had brought us to the 14th floor of Hargrove and Sims. Mitchell's position, as articulated by Clifton Beauvais in a letter I received 6 weeks before that meeting, was that the transfer was improper. That I had taken advantage of an elderly woman, his words, about our mother to acquire property that should rightfully be part of the family estate. That the deed should be voided. That the house should be sold and the proceeds split according to the will. My position was considerably simpler. I owned the house. I had owned it for 11 years. I had paid every tax bill, every repair invoice, every utility that kept the lights on while my mother lived there. The transfer was legal, documented, witnessed, and recorded. There was nothing to discuss. Mitchell apparently felt there was quite a bit to discuss. Hence Clifton Beauvais. Hence the conference room. Hence the almost smile when I walked in without a lawyer. "Raymond," Mitchell said, settling back in his chair with the ease of a man who believes the furniture is on his side. "I want you to understand I don't think you meant any harm." "All right," I said. "Mother was old. She made decisions that weren't always fully considered. I understand that you were trying to help." He paused. "But you have to see how this looks." "How does it look?" I asked. "It looks like you maneuvered her. When she was vulnerable, when she needed someone she could trust." I looked at him for a moment. "She needed someone who would pay the property taxes," I said. 3 years of them. I paid them. I've paid every bill on that house for 11 years. Every single one. Where were you when the furnace went out in January of 2013, Mitchell?" He glanced at Clifton Beauvais. "Raymond, I had a business to run. I had obligations. I couldn't always—" "I was in Kandahar in January of 2013, I said. "I wired the money from an FOB with intermittent satellite connection. I didn't mention it because I didn't think it needed mentioning. I thought taking care of your mother was something you just did." The room was quiet for a moment. Clifton Beauvais cleared his throat. "Mr. Calhoun, the elder Mr. Calhoun, the legal question here isn't about who paid what bills. It's about whether the transfer itself was conducted appropriately, whether your mother had full understanding of what she was signing, whether—" "She had full understanding," I said. Her attorney was present. Patricia Denise Waller, formerly Captain Patricia Waller, Judge Advocate General's Corps. She notarized it herself. "Would you like her number?" Another glance between them. "We're prepared to offer you fair market value for your half," Clifton Beauvais said, pivoting smoothly the way expensive lawyers do. "A buyout, essentially." "You'd walk away with—" "My half?" I said. 50% of the current appraised—" "There is no half," I said. "I own the property. 100%. There's no buyout because there's nothing to buy out. Mitchell has no ownership interest." I'm not sure who told him he did. Mitchell's jaw tightened. For a moment, something moved across his face that I recognized the same expression he'd had at that Thanksgiving dinner 42 years ago, when a younger brother with no business degree had told him he was joining the army. Disbelief. Not the kind that comes from being surprised. The kind that comes from being told the world doesn't work the way you'd arranged it in your head. "Raymond," his voice had changed. The patient, slightly pained tone was gone. "That house has been in our family for over 50 years. Dad built that porch with his own hands. You can't just—" "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I own it. I plan to keep it. My mother wanted it to stay in the family, and it is staying in the family. You're half of the family," he said. "Our mother chose," I said simply. The room was very quiet after that. Clifton Beauvais shuffled his papers. He was good at his job. I could see him recalculating, looking for another angle, the way a good intelligence officer looks for a second line of approach when the first one closes off. There may be grounds to challenge the original transfer on the basis of undue influence, he said, in the careful tone of a man who isn't certain but needs to say something. You're welcome to try, I said. Patricia Waller is currently a partner at Fenton and Waller in Lexington. She has full documentation of every communication surrounding the transfer, including the letter, written in my mother's own hand, explaining her reasons. You'd be arguing that a woman with all her faculties, a woman who ran a household alone for 15 years after her husband died, who kept her own accounts, who read every document she ever signed, was manipulated by her son. In Harlan County, in front of a jury that likely knew her. I looked at my brother. I don't think you want to do that to her memory, Mitchell. But it's your choice. Another silence. Longer this time. Outside the window, Lexington was going about its morning. Traffic, clouds, the ordinary running of the world. Mitchell was looking at his hands. I had known this man for 64 years. I had sat across from him at dinner tables and in hospital waiting rooms and at our father's funeral and at our mother's. I had never hated him. Frustration, yes. The particular weariness that comes from being perpetually underestimated by someone who should know better. But not hatred. I felt none of those things at that particular moment. I felt something quieter. Something close to the feeling I had on the morning I turned in my uniform for the last time, not triumph, not relief, just a clear-eyed recognition that a long chapter had ended and whatever came next was going to be different. I'd like to make you an offer, I said. Mitchell looked up. The house needs work. The porch Dad built is sound, but the paint is gone, and 2 of the boards need replacing. The back bedroom where you and I used to sleep still has that water stain on the ceiling from the leak. In 2018, I patched the roof but never got around to repainting. There's about 40 years of family photographs in boxes in the spare room. Mother's china is in the cabinet in the dining room. I paused. I'm not selling it. But you're welcome to come back. Spend some time there. Take what you want from those boxes. I'll fix up the porch. We can sit on it. He looked at me for a long time. You're serious, he said finally. I'm always serious, I said. Ask anyone who ever served under me. Something shifted in his face. Not softening, exactly. More like a man who has been pushing against a wall for a long time and has just realized the wall was never going to move and is deciding what to do with his hands now. You were in the army for how long? He said. 31 years. And you? He stopped. Started again. What rank did you retire at? Colonel, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Clifton Beauvais was very busy looking at his papers. You never told me that, Mitchell said. You never asked, I said. You asked if I was keeping busy. I told you I was. He made a sound that might have been a laugh, or something close to it, from a man who doesn't laugh easily. Short and involuntary, and then gone. The porch, he said. The porch, I said. We didn't hug in the parking lot. We're not that kind of family. Mitchell shook my hand, a real handshake, not the Clifton Beauvais kind, and said he'd call about coming out to the house in the fall, and I said that was fine, and we went to our respective cars. I sat in the parking lot for a while before I drove anywhere. I thought about my mother, the way she looked the morning we signed those papers. The particular dignity of a woman who has spent her whole life working hard and worrying and holding things together, finally setting something down. The way she said, as Patricia Waller gathered up the documents, now I don't have to worry about it anymore. Not triumphant. Not relieved. Just settled. I thought about my father's porch and how he'd built it the summer I was 8, and how I'd handed him nails and held boards while he worked, and how even then I'd understood there was a kind of strength that didn't need an audience. I thought about 31 years of early mornings and long deployments and decisions made in the dark with imperfect information, and how none of it had looked like anything from the outside, not to Mitchell, not to most people, and how that had never mattered because the work itself had always been the point. I thought about how my mother used to say when we were boys and Mitchell was holding court at the dinner table and I was sitting quietly at the end. Raymond, the river doesn't argue with the stone. It just keeps moving. She was a wise woman. I drove home. The house on Sycamore Ridge Road still smells like cedar soap when you walk in the front door. I don't know how she's been gone 18 months and I've aired it out twice and repainted the hallway, but it does. Some things settle into the walls of a place and don't come back out regardless of what you do. There are 43 years worth of photographs in those boxes in the spare room. I've started going through them on Sunday evenings, at 6 o'clock, because that was when she and I would talk, and it seemed like the right time to be in that room. Mitchell and I in the yard one summer, our father on the porch, our mother young, in a dress I don't recognize, laughing at something off camera. The ordinary record of a family that loved each other imperfectly and tried. Mitchell called in September. He came out with Sandra, which surprised me, and with Beau, who was 26 and nothing like his father in the ways that matter, and we sat on the repaired porch and drank coffee and talked for 3 hours about nothing in particular. Mitchell ran his hand along the railing his father had built. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't need to. The property taxes are current. The roof is sound. The water stain in the back bedroom is painted over, and if you know where to look, you can still see a slight shadow of it, but you'd have to know it was there. I know it's there. 31 years in the Army teaches you that most of the important things are like that, invisible to everyone except the people who did the work to fix them. The repairs nobody sees. The decisions made before dawn when no one is watching. The taxes paid from a forward operating base in the middle of a desert because a woman in Kentucky should not have to leave her home. My mother knew I would keep it. She trusted that before she said it out loud, before the papers were signed, before any of it. She knew the way she always knew the way mothers know, the quiet certain way, without needing to see the proof first. I think about that, on Sunday evenings, on that porch. I think she was right. She was always right. The house is still here. The family is still here, however imperfectly. The porch my father built is solid under my feet. That's enough. That's more than enough. The strongest people in your life often make the least noise about it. Raymond never announced what he paid, never kept score, never asked to be seen. He just showed up, quietly, from the other side of the world, and made sure the lights stayed on. That kind of love doesn't need an audience. And if someone in your life has been that quiet river running steadily behind the scenes, it's never too late to simply say, I know. And I'm grateful. A small note to our viewers. This story was created and imagined by AI, crafted to bring you an hour of meaningful entertainment and leave you with something warm to carry into your day.